So with that, we also understand the polarity dynamics, as in transformation of energy in the fifth cycle is no longer what we do. The only thing we're allowed to transform following the 1-7 pillar is our own energy system. And that's the last piece of the activation on our planet of the older pillar project technologies. And these two levels are the 1-7 pillar is transhuman now, and the 2-8 is under the whatever is coming now the next 12 years. So we won't focus on that one. So we must lift out and we must follow the path of elevation, where we understand what to look at, what not to look at, what to meddle with, what not to meddle with, what to interfere with, what not to interfere with. And technically, you can say the only things you're allowed to interfere with, if we are going to make it, will be others that are doing the hope program as well. That means going into the fifth cycle. We can work in concord with the fifth dimensional races of POM variety. We can work with the fifth dimensional version of the Andromedan enhanced humans, and we can work with the fifth dimensional version of the enhanced humans that will come back once the entirety of this reality has shifted into the fifth dimension, which is in the process of doing now. So that is what will unfold in 2023, where our enclosure will accommodate and shift into features that will align later on with the fifth dimension, all the technologies and all of the reality features that follows with that one. So the toolkit for us now is to regroup and reset and re-understand that everything we've been doing so far no longer applies, other than the progression work and the understanding of how to work with energy in a conscious way, that if we are working with fourth cycle energies, we transform them. If we are working with fifth cycle energies, we keep our nose to ourselves and only focus on what is on our side of the polarity. We are aware of the other side of the polarity, but we no longer interfere with it. Unless we want to do a trial, unless we kind of do something we shouldn't have done because we were not, had not switched our double awareness off because we were a little bit of sleepwalking and got ourselves into trouble, then we must do the trial and prove that that was just a common mistake. And you will then learn by it and show by your actions that you do not repeat your mistake, because we will come under the law of 3. You have one mistake that can be trialed and you can be let go of. Yeah, that was innocent, not knowing. Now the person knows what it is, and then the person will self-correct. Step number 2, if you then do it again, that's the trickery. They will try to make you do it again. So you will get under the second trial, where you will get the second warning. If you flunk on the third one, then they can push you through their programs, and by that attempt you and trial you by effectively pushing you into their programs, where you then will have to work your way out by exemplifying the original rules of who and what you are as part of the progressive world. So now we are the battle zone of jurisdictional energy and jurisdictional rights are now going to a completely new level, which makes it very difficult to do business. But here we understand why the internet is changing as it is, and why everything is now being made into virtual reality, because there we will shift out of physical goods and physical places and physical go this, go there, where you have to travel by car or what have you. We will have, as we already have with the airports, of course, planes are going to shift as well in the future, right? But right now, what we have with, in the old world order, hospitals and airports were neutral zones. Technically, hospitals are under the grays, but they were neutral zones. So whoever entered there, of course, if to put it that way, hospitals are mainly made for clones, because the ones that were under the active programs were being maintained. So technically, they needed to go to the hospital. So that's a clone thing. But airports were where everybody could travel in without coming in harm's way or being harvested or being tampered with. So that's a neutral zone. If you go into an airport, it's a complete. There you are not interfering. There you are not hostile towards anyone. There you are in that neutral zone where everybody's allowed to be, like a hub, as we saw it in the movie Men in Black. The hub where you come in and where you enter into this reality field, which is very, very accurate of what our airports are. And the reason why that is exemplified is because we have the stellar gates and the other hubs that goes with the portals, where that same mechanism, they can move in and out with their crafts, which are not to be interfered with, as they vibrate up and shift modality from where they can transfer from one reality field to another, using the gates that are what we call the advanced version of a wormhole, which in the future will not be called a wormhole, but a Fermi bridge. both because we have Fermilab that figured it out with the Google computer, right? But also because we have the Fermi paradox, as in, where are all the aliens? Well, they've been here all along. It's just because we have been able to see them, and then playing on the third version of it as the Fermi bridge, that's what allows the aliens to come back in. So that's what this is for. So they are going to create that large wormhole where they will come in, and you'll think Avengers right away, right? But that's part of that. Not like that, but it will be very similar. We're already seeing the coronal holes in the sun that has that natural feature where the energy field suddenly becomes void, and then it looks like darkness into nothingness, which is so odd because we have a tendency to think of our sun as manifest, but it's plasma. So it's actually not manifest. It can be extinguished anytime. You can harvest all the plasma, the sun will be gone. It's only if it does its natural processes, it turns into solidified material and becomes a neutron star from where it would explode and turn into dust. But if it's harvested on its energetic level, the plasma level, it will just cease to exist. It's just, then it's gone. Simple as that. No biggie. Okay, or you move the holographic configuration behind. That's why the Arcturians try to keep up the density 2 configuration, which collapsed because the fields and the shields of the sun were collapsing, and by that they cannot uphold any density 2 technology because there's no holographic imprint to uphold it. And I talk about these dynamics in the Ho's New Reality Challenges of the Sun. So you get that information in that course if you want to know the dynamics of our sun and our magnetic field and the implications of that. So we are here having a whole new ball game where everything is changing, and we as progressive humans are to learn, okay, how do we then do that? How do we then adapt to this? And this is part of the toolkit where I will look a little bit into the 3 different levels of our work in the text material and some of the male and female principles, because we're going to work differently inside the reality in the 5th cycle. Males are going to work under specific types of principles, and females are going to work under different types of principles that goes with our reconfiguration. And that will then be the new psychosocial, sexual for some, non-sexual for others, features of our psychology that will then no longer be determined by biology, because that can now be adapted and changed in a heartbeat, including with CRISPR, where fetuses can already be re-engineered if they are naturally inclined to become females, but that will lead to a specific type of RNA features that leads to a specific type of blood diseases, sickle cell, for instance. Well, then they can adapt and change the gender while it's in the stem cell level, and then it becomes a female instead. They have already tested that, and that's ready for implementation. Then there is the understanding that the next 12 years we're going to work on the 2-8 pillar, the first of many for the highest good of the many, while we understand the original dynamics before the breeder programs, before the taking over of the Inanna programs, before the contamination, before the fall zones, before the underworld, before all of that. And then what are we then to do in the light of the 2-8 pillar activation processes that we are working towards? And I'm working with that on an individual level in the reconfiguration of the male and female. These things are worked with in separate courses because females need to be focused completely on what are females to do, and males are to focus completely on their type of energy work, which means that if you do at some point choose to become a progression couple, then you will have your own sovereign energy configuration. You will stand completely sovereign in your own energy system. And you will then accomplish each other, you will supplement each other, you will lift each other, you will work as sometimes merged fields, other times as sovereign fields. If you are if one is kind of dropping in energy, you can pull out and stand sovereign, and you keep the configuration, and then you can lift your partner back up as your partner does the clearing work and lifts him or herself up, and likewise and otherwise and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? So this is how we're going to help each other to continue to progress, where one is always taking the lead and then controlling the joint field, and then the other is is catching up, and then the other one, as in the catching up processes are transmuting more and more energy, will then lift up via the third cycle dynamics to a higher synergetic level, which will then allow for what we could call a lifting of the joint field, and then the other one can lift up and reconfigure, and that's where we're going to use the fifth cycle cube technology, memory technology, where the one that's always a little bit ahead of the other can see what needs to be cleared, can play it out via the imprint mechanisms, as you learned about in the 6 layers of how to process energy in the transformative energy system, and with that create the program that is necessary for the other one to upgrade accordingly within the understanding of the differences in the male and the female configuration. So to begin with, it will be the females that will enter the fifth cycle first, especially the non-breeders. The ones that were part of the breeder programs have a lot of things to clear out, and I will address that in specifically to some degree in the female reconfiguration, but mostly it is oriented towards the non-breeders because they don't have that quote unquote curse in them. They're not tied to the underworld to the same degree as if you have given birth. And my dear friend in Australia, she and I worked to get out of the breeder program and clear that. And with her help and her support, I got that program cleared out, and it took me 5 years. So it was not an easy thing to do. And that's the only way to get rid of the dark white configuration in us as part of our fetal pattern, as part of what we got from our fathers, is if that we as females are either non-breeders, or that our parents choose to leave the planet and cross over or die if they're a clone, or that we are freed from the energy field of our parents, as in kind of they get overridden and take over, and even though the body is still here, de facto they are something completely else, and that sets us free, as we experienced with my mother that died physically and got revived, and she's no longer her, she's something else, and by that I've been set free. So either the very, very tough path of clearing out our lineage, which I did already, but it didn't succeed due to the fetal pattern, the strength in the fetal pattern that affects the molecular state, as well as the emotional field and these configurations. So these are some of the things that are predominant for the females that have given birth, and the non-breeders. And as I said, I will focus more on the non-breeders, because the ones that are in the breeder programs, you will learn it the hard way as the 2-8 pillar activates, that whatever you have been part of there will then show itself, and you will just deal with it as it presents itself, and you will take that battle as the cycle cleans themselves out. And most of you that are now part of that program of the 2-8 pillar, that's because you were there already. So that means also kind of jurisdictional push into where we actually belong as part of the reconfiguration of the outer domain. We're now being pushed into the cycles where we lost our footing. And mine was in the 5th. So that's why I'm being pushed there now, literally mother pulling out of the density 2 pillar project version and now pushing me back into the 5th cycle of the outer domain, where I normally operated when I were in the outer domains. The 5th cycle, 5th dimension of the outer domain, because we have a 5th cycle, 5th dimension in the middle domains as well. Just keep that in mind. These are 2 different things, because these are 2 different vibrational states and 2 different types of consciousness. So therefore it's part of that understanding. And the males have their own. The reason why I'm not talking about that so much is because that's a project I'm actually working on right now, figuring out, okay, what do we then do with the solar males, the ones that have the possibility to shift into the XX chromosome, changing their Y chromosome into an X chromosome? What does that take? Do we then dismantle completely the Y chromosome and then replicates the X chromosome into a male variety? What is possible? What's not possible? What is the original male configuration of the solar races, which is the one that I will try to create the blueprint for? Because when we talk about the stellar activation cycle, they already did that with the colontics. All of that were part of the colontics attempt to reconfigure the Y chromosome of males, which you also know did not go very well. And eventually they let go of the male counter to Jeanne and found someone else, a Norwegian of some kind of Scandinavian type, right? Interesting, as part of the future humanity. So she is now on a different path, and whatever will be presented is something else than it was back in the stellar activation cycle. But we always knew she only had 12 years, right? So that's how it goes. So with that text material, I will go through that. It's the same as part of the reconfiguration, but here, as always, I will work with the same level of information, but look at it, okay, how do we then operate inside the base program? Because that's going to be the project for the change makers. As in, how do we create a kind of, first and foremost, jurisdiction in a way that's easy? You buy a piece of land and you build a house there, and then you battle what is in the nature, the area where you live. And once you've done all the battles on the fourth dimension and you get up to the fifth and you can begin to pull in the cube technology, then that's your jurisdiction, which I've done with my house as well. But the battle, that's the difficult part, right? That's all the fourth cycle. And if you are living on a fault line, that I keep calling it a vault, but it's a fault line, but the fault line goes into the second cycle. That is a vault of underworld stuff. Well, then that's the dead zone, as I talk about the whole philosophy book as well. Then that's a no-go. You don't buy a house on a dead zone because that's going to fall. So you buy a house where there is a viability rate, but that will always means insectoid, avian, reptoid, and different forms of regress races that are still present in our reality field in animal form and are still linked up to what's left of the original middle domain as it ceased to exist and collapse. And then that sector will be taken over by the transhuman agenda and the POMs. And then instead of dealing with insectoids and reptoids and what have you, you will then be dealing with greys and alternate realities and clone programs and pulling ins and all sorts of shenanigans that goes with these races. And they will harvest you dry because you're in their jurisdiction. So that also gives us challenges for the whole community setting. Just to put that in context, because as we begin to work with as teams, some of you would like to be partners, some of you would like to join in communities, and then we are in a whole other level, a whole other ball game. So where do we find these outskirts of reality where we're not dealing with the dark forces or dealing with the POM races or dealing with the transhuman agenda? And that's some of the reasons why I won't talk about the enhanced humans and the future humans. They are just thinking, yeah, we'll go off planet because this planet, there's no room left for us unless, of course, we move to Antarctica or to levels on our planet where nobody has lived, which is why the caps are melting. So we get new land zones where we will move into the future. And there will be the groups that will move into Arctica, and there will be the groups that will move into Antarctica. And we're not part of the Antarctican programs. We are part of the Arctic programs, those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's where we will have our future land masses. And they are appointed to us by law because that was these are the fifth cycle land masses that will stand as the rest of the planet either sinks into the ocean or get flooded or turns into dead zones, and all of the future aspects of our planet. And the two viable spots would be the ones that are close to the influx and outflux of energies on our planet following the natural similar as the plasma coil, not a magnetic field, but the original density, influx and outflux of energies that will create a fifth dimensional, fifth cycle zone at the top and a fourth cycle transhuman zone at the bottom. So that will eventually shift in the future. So we will only have fifth cycle and fourth cycle. And by that, the third cycle will no longer be present on our planet. So that's the big thing. And that will only happen once the flank on the east and the new Atlantis on the west, that flank has done their programs. And then what's left, as I said, with future humans, enhanced humans, and transhuman agenda. And that where we fit in. So we are going for, again, that's why I've been positioned in Denmark. It becomes more and more clear why I was born here, that if that happened, if I were to activate, which was not the plan, but once the programs began to break down, my natural configuration kicked in. And it was arranged that way, that if the other programs that were under my brother did not succeed, then I was the default fail-safe card to take down all of that and then try to create my program as a last attempt of the progressive so they could get to me and activate me. And then he would stand trialed as a failed project, which he has been, and by that all of his technologies could be shut down. And that's also why we're now shifting, because everything he implemented as part of his project are now more or less gone and are collapsing. And that's why the enclosure is collapsing too, because that trial has been done. It was done last week. So this means that why are we doing this? Why are the Ancient Ones giving us 50,000 years as part of the fifth cycle of the original outer domain configuration? Because then they can do what the progressive have done. They can play all by the laws, all the ways that it's supposed to be done by the laws of a more advanced race with a lesser advanced race, in the assistance of what we call horizontal and vertical supervision and mentoring on the different levels of existence, which goes with the LPU project. The progressive true humans have played out all that they could have done. Every single possible thing they could have done, that has been done. And by the law, they are entitled to pull out, because every single human being inside this reality has shown in all the ways that there are no longer an interest for the original joint programs of the true humans and the humanoids. So they have done everything they could. And that's why Mother also pulled out. And that's why we have the new grand cycle. And that's why everything that relates to the original holographic metaverse is being shut down. But then there is the position inside the construction and the universal sectors under the Ancient Ones, and they need to do the same. So that's why we get 50,000 years in the fifth cycle under the original construction, under the original programs, and under the original laws of the Ancient Ones and their technologies to do our elevation. And if there's nobody going there, then they can rightfully move along, or the construction itself will, due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity, move into the next cycles, where it will then go back into a dormant state, but will be activated as the new universal cycle races will move through it, spill over, ignite it, live there, unfold their potentials there, complete their processes there, from where the construction will then reset to default and go dormant until a next universal cycle push a collective of consciousness units and energy units and life force units and what have you that will come in the future into it and ignite it on higher and higher levels, until these constructions have also played out all of their elevation processes via the different groups of collectives of consciousness and energy that has moved through it, traversed through it, and adapted it to a higher potentiality. Then the lesser versions of it will decompose, fall into the abyss, and then the constructions of the Ancient Ones will then upgrade until it's lifted up to the highest potentiality of all the 12 universal cycles, from where the Ancient Ones will then be completely freed from all of the universal cycles, and their technology and their realities, what they have made, will then cease to exist and collapse. And by that, we will then move into completely new reality engineering and reality constructions, which can no longer be called construction or engineering, but will be based upon consciousness imbued with different forms of energy that we have no comprehension of yet, and life force, which we have absolutely no understanding of yet. And with that, continue into new types of sectors and new segments, where the continuation of all that is and all that will be and all that can be will continue its progressive dynamics and progression possibilities and progression processes to elevate to the highest possible progression rate, the highest possible standards, and the highest possible purity rate. So the rest of this course, I'm going to do a little bit with the text material. As I said, it's the same as the reconfiguration, just the intro, the text is the same, but the interpretation will be tailored to working inside the base program with our configuration. And it's enormously important to understand that there are new laws that kicks in now, that the only way we can do the fifth cycle is if we are administering our energy system to the dot. The only way we can elevate is that if we follow the holographic instructions we will get from the construction of the Ancient Ones to the dot, we will get a cube above our head that will tell us if we are in any ways or forms if we're straying off, if we're getting out of the program, if there is a danger of now we are losing the momentum, the viability rate is not high enough to stay inside the construction of the Ancient Ones in the fifth cycle, then we will have warning signs. We will get, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to let go of, and we will follow this very quickly. What the cubes are doing for us is that they are running us on a daily basis through segments of the program, which means the rotundum will now kick in so that we every day complete the sequence and must complete it every day. And with that also comes, many of you will discover that your sleeping pattern will change. Sometimes you will be sleeping at nighttime where you will rest your mental field, and then you'll be awake working for vibrational energy and physical energy inside the base program. And then you will discover other times you are sleeping during daytime because there you're not to work in the base program, but you work on the mental field, which means you awake at nighttime. And other times you will discover you'll be sleeping while the emotional field is in operation, because there you need to work with the biofield and the base program and the mental, because you're constructing new architecture and new ideas. And you will learn to have a fluent sleeping pattern. That means you're no longer bound by, I go to sleep at 12 and I wake up at 7, but you are actually sleeping when you are no longer needed in terms of exemplification inside this reality. And you will then be pulled in to be recalibrated with new types of modalities that follows the fifth cycle under the Ancient Ones. And you will then exemplify it when you are awake, and you will work in a pace that for many will seem superhuman. The enhanced human kids are doing the same thing, and the kids from the future are doing the same thing. They have an enormous amount of energy, and they are literally just pushing through every day to reach their highest purity rate, their highest standards, and their highest progression rate. And we're going to do the same. So we're going to play the game completely different, where we really navigate inside the base program with super speed and superhuman potentials and super performance, as I always talked about, the highest performance rate. So the fifth cycle is not for laggards. The fifth cycle is not for the lazy. The fifth cycle is not for the weak. And the fifth cycle are not for the ones that are still stuck in the fourth cycle understandings of what's important. We are now beginning to build the future if there is going to be any forms of future solar races. And that's why the Ancient Ones have given us that last chance to do that. Because there's still some of us left. Whether it's 2 or 3 people, there's still some of us left. And as long as there's still someone left that can enter into that program, then it must be there. That's by law. And I am still here. So I am the last of the many in the fourth cycle, because I'm pulling out and shutting all of my affiliations down there, including mothers pull out. I'm done in the fourth cycle, not going there, not interested in going there. That's a done deal. So that means that who I'm going to work with will now be as part of the projects of the fifth cycle, which is why all the progression science course material is now self-study. So you have it, but I don't have to interact anymore. That's why I don't have sessions with people that are doing the progression work, because that's now up to them. They must work their own way up. That's the law. It's always been like that, especially now when I moved into the fifth cycle, where I become the first of many, which means that I must play by all the laws of the fifth cycle, which means I can no longer interfere with people inside the base program. I can give advice, but I'm not allowed to interfere in any ways or forms, which means that I'm only allowed to work with them if they address me. I cannot address them. That would be seen as field intrusion. So therefore, I can no longer hold group classes in the fourth cycle. I can no longer do YouTube videos as I used to do, talking about the progression work. I can talk about the other factions, but that would technically also be seen as field intrusion, which is why I made the last version of this in the toolkit, where I focus on this is what is. But it's already part of the perception log. It's already part of my old material. You already know what needs to be said there. That's why I've been making that material. So it's seated in on lower levels of existence, a lower existence point in an older version of the programs, which means that it's allowed to be there as part of the past, which you then have there. What you need to know is already there, because I work from what we could say a future point of view. So what am I allowed to do? I'm allowed to build the architecture of the fifth cycle, and I'm allowed to create versions of businesses that will accommodate the fifth cycle to be implemented into our reality field under the future human projects of the Arctic civilization, of the upcoming new root race that will be reseeded after 2066. So all the things I will be doing now will be the architecture and the course material that where we now work to align ourselves with the original construction in the outer domain, where all of our science projects and whatever we are producing will have the feature of transforming fourth cycle energies into fifth cycle energies, where all that we work with as projects must be oriented towards the future humanities to create a foundation for the fifth cycle programs to be exemplified inside this reality field as part of physical forms, as part of a reality setting where physical forms exist. As long as it's just a hologram or a developmental program and nobody's using it, then even though I have made it and I stand there and I'm standing there saying, hey, I'm here, come. If you don't work your way up, if you don't do the energy work that's needed, if you don't transform your energy system into the fifth cycle, if you're not exemplified as part of the reality field, if you're not unfolding as part of the holographic teaching system, and you follow the knowledge you get, and you follow the sciences you get, and you follow the instructions you get, then you are not working effectively with the original outer domain construction of the fifth cycle. And by that, nobody has worked with it. It has not been implemented. It has not been integrated. It has not been activated correctly. And by that, the ancient one can say, well, we put in 50,000 years, but we had that limited span where people could shift into it. And that's perhaps only 5,000 years. Perhaps it's only 50 years. We don't know yet how long that's going to go, because it all depends on if nobody has gone there while it's now been activated, and I'm the only one, and I will go in 2066, then I'm done here. If nobody has gone into it when I'm gone, there will be no anchor point anymore. Right now, I am the anchor point for that type of reality. And if I'm gone, the anchor point is gone. And if nobody else has gone there and have become new anchor points and are working with these technologies and the construction and the developmental programs following the original rule set of elevation of the ancient ones, as it is determined and is unfolded in our sector, this is where our planet is part of. So that is by law, the dynamics. If you want to elevate, that's under the ancient ones. Otherwise, it's the other opportunities of the POMs and the phantoms. So either that way, or you go with the ancient ones. So if that's the case and you can't follow these dynamics, well, then the only option you have are the enhanced humans and their Andromedan programs of the future, or the breakaway civilizations of future humanity that went to Mars and then took a different trajectory under the Arcturians and whoever the Neo-Nibiruans and whoever they were working with. So that's also part of that understanding that this is the outermost last call out for those of us who want to follow the original elevation dynamics. And then as I go, and if nobody has followed, well, then the ancient ones can say, we did what we could. We gave it 40 years inside the reality as it is. We gave the teachings on the correct level. We gave the technologies on the correct level. We let the igniter of the understanding of the past and the present and the future enter. She ignited it. She created the architecture. She implemented it. She did everything she could. To see a little bit of things on my shoulder, but I get all the instructions of what I need to do. So that's how it's been done correctly. And they have upgraded me to do so. And they will constantly upgrade me to maintain that architecture. But once I'm gone, I'm gone. And then everything I've created, because the last 3 years or 4 years of my life, perhaps earlier, all depending on reality, I will take down the whole academy. I'll take down all my YouTube videos. I'll take down everything I created. So the only thing that will be left when I leave will be the remaining copies of my work and downloads and books and what have you out there. Everything else, the blueprint of it, the architecture of it, the whatever book on demand versions of it, they will not be there in 40 years, right? All of that will be gone. So there will be nothing left of me or the holographic metaverse or any of us that used to be part of these worlds. So this is what's at stake here. for those of you who are choosing to go into the fifth cycle. So it's a humongous opportunity to learn to be an advanced civilization, but under some very strict rules set with an enormous high transgression rate that makes it very difficult. But it is also the choice that must be done, as in if you really choose to do that, the levels of change that you must undergo will supersede and will change everything you are foundationally. And with that, everything that you have been accustomed to, you must leave behind. And here I want to just allude to the Gospels, where to enter into the kingdom of heaven, you must leave everything behind. Your family, your friends, what you believe, your religion, your affiliation with the priesthood, your teachers, everything that you are, you must leave behind. And that is how it's understood when we talk about entering into the higher realms of existence, not necessarily the kingdom of heaven. But if you look in the outer domain features and say, what is the highest level you can achieve in the outer domain? That's the fifth cycle. And that's why it's also been alluded to as Christ consciousness. That is where we complete the cycles and we move back to where we actually belong, or move on into other systems that we choose to participate in, all depending on if we want to go straight up, or we want to go to the left, or we want to go to the right, or we want to go in some other direction in a fifth dimensional space that has no direction. All we have is our energy configuration that determines where we are, because time does not exist, space does not exist. But what does exist is energy and consciousness and life form that is expressed via different constructions that we participate in and we become part of, and we operate via to create our organic vessels, to create the forms that we need to be part of that segment of reality from where we'll continue to develop our progression potentials as highly evolved beings and highly evolved civilizations, until we've done that and move on to the next sector, until we no longer can see ourselves as civilizations, but become collectives of consciousness and enormously expanded perception spheres of energy that encompasses universal structures and become similar to what we understand as the next generation of the ancient ones. Thank you.